Welcome in. It is the Sunday Morning Hangover right here on ESPN 680, 1057, the ESPN Louisville app. Also a hybrid little field of 68, Floyd Street's finest with our boy Jack Grossman. Jack, how are you, my friend?
Man, I am fantastic, Phil. How you doing? As I'm going
Oh,
to mute my phone so that we don't get a bunch
I
of
did as well.
dings the next
I,
hour or
I,
so.
I did as well, my friend. It's good to see you. Wanted to link up with you, not across from the Laundry and Tan Connection, which you got to come by the studio. They have a fence around it here soon. So
Really? Are they
yeah,
finally building the Target?
not building a target, building a green space.
Even
Apparently,
better.
I actually, that was the last beacon of journalism I've done is where I reached out to the people that said they were going to build a target. I was like, hey, it's been like 5 to 6 years. Can we get an update on that? And this nice little older secretary gave me, she's like, yeah, I'll pass your stuff along. That was like 6 months ago and I never heard back. So I'm not holding my breath on a Target or a hotel going across the street. The latest Business First article said that a green space for the time being is going over there. So there you go on that front. So Mark with the C. Weinberg giving us an okay, favorable forecast. A ton of rain in the area. So hopefully, if everyone's listening, I know the Valvanos have been dealing with some flooding in their condo and some things out there. Hopefully, your family's okay up here at Louisville. I'm not sure if you got any of it down in Atlanta.
Yeah, we avoided most of it down here, but yeah, my mom was driving through most of it, which is a choice, but it worked out for her and my aunt driving back from visiting some family. So we're all good. Thankfully, hope you guys are all good as well. I know it's been pretty scary up there the last couple of weeks or so.
Yeah, no, it's been wild in regards to just the amount of rain that it's got air. So like my
Yeah,
wife
and
works
also
down by.
Thunder over Louisville's canceled. That sucks, man.
Well, and look, at first I was, everybody was going to go zero to like the swimming pools being closed during COVID and all that. But my wife actually, Lord, works by the Kentucky Center for the Arts, and I like she showed me photos of like how far it's come up to like their parking garage, and not necessarily like the water's supposed to start receding. It was more so along the lines of the cleanup is just gonna. I mean, there's like a
Right.
freaking logs like in the middle of like River Road that are like the size of dinosaurs. Like I don't even know. Like yeah, power wash it. I don't even know the parameters around how you're able
Right.
to
And I'm
get that
not
up.
trying to say, go on and do it with all that mess there. I'm just more of along the lines of that's something I know growing up in Louisville. I looked forward to that every single year. That was like the kickoff of the Derby Festival. That along with March Madness, that's the best time of year to be in the city. And it's just sad that that's not
Yeah,
going to happen this year
they did it
because of
during
what.
COVID. Yeah, they did it during COVID where it was like remote. Do you remember that? Where it was
Yeah, they
kind
did
of
it.
like
They did it from the fairgrounds. I
like
remember. Yeah.
Bowman Field, Fairgrounds. I feel like they did it like Caesar Southern Indiana. So I don't know like the parameters around how much red tape you have to go through. There's a ton of moving parts I would have to imagine, or if it's just one of those things like, hey, we're going to spend like $1 million plus on fireworks, and we're not going to get a fraction of the people down there for that. Let's just roll it over to next year. And I don't claim to know that. That's just me purely speculating on that. But yes, it is sad. But the other events will go on here, there, your Derby station right here on ESPN Louisville. Going to be kind of a hybrid text line today, 437-9680. If you want to use the text line, I know Jack probably has gotten some tweets over the last week or so with putting a bow on the college basketball season, but want to link up with him. Nick Kern doing some of his responsibilities. Look, between the rainouts, I think on Thursday, they're making up some games last night. It was supposed to be Thunder over Louisville yesterday. We're giving our boy a little time off. He may be able to join coming up here in a bit. Like I said, if you want to interact with us at ESPN 680, you can give Jackie Boy a follow at Jack Grossman 97, at Phil underscore Baker. Still working on that double
Hey, one
underscore.
of these days, man.
One of these days. Elon's new Twitter. Elon's new, yeah, baby, or new X, whatever they're called. And Nick Curran, 35. James Black producing today's show. Okay, so Jackie Boy, I wanted to get with you. I know you were on with Strebel earlier. I know you've done a ton of podcasts for the Field of 68. This will be a hybrid, so you'll be posting this up on your channels as well. Appreciate that.
Yep,
And
like,
subscribe.
subscribe, all that stuff.
Attaboy.
Thank you, Phil.
You're a
Floyd Treats
pro.
Finest, part of the Field 68 Podcast Network. Shameless plug on my end.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've gotten a bunch of people that I love hearing from you, and then they want to know what you're up to. And I know you're a basketball Benny, but wanted to have you on, to help us out because just kind of both remote today, but also from the standpoint putting a bow on the college basketball season. I know you got a bunch of thoughts about that. Some news came out that was you're the perfect person for Louisville and Indiana, according to Jeff Goodman, slated to play up in Indianapolis, I believe, on December 6th.
Yep.
And then also we have some news about the Pat Kelsey raise that we all thought was coming. Some narratives here I wanted to pick your brain about for that, of just like where the hierarchy is as a whole. And then I know you and Coach Lieberman talked about the transfer portal, some of the additions there. And I know you probably more than most have watched, South Harmon Institute of Technology transfers when no one else has. I'm kidding. That's an accepted joke movie that just completely went over your head. But
Yes, it is.
nonetheless, you need to watch a movie. You'd actually really like it. I feel like it's
Yeah,
perfect for you.
which
But
movie is that?
it's called Accepted. It's
Okay.
with Jonah Hill when he's in there, Justin Long, and a bunch of other people that before they got off. It's a really good
I
movie.
feel like I've seen the trailer for this before. Is that the
It's
one where they make?
basically
Is
they
that the
create a
one where they
fake
make up?
college.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
South Harmon Institute of Technology calls out you do the words in there for what at university. But anyways, I joke about that. They come from Xavier, they come from Kennesaw State, some of the transfers, but I know you've probably seen more of them than most, as well as Virginia. So we'll dive into that. But Jackie boy, I mean, you tell me, where do you want to start? Do you want to start putting a bow on the college basketball season as a whole, or do you kind of want to go down the hierarchy of the raise that's out there, or do you want to go that's the fastball up the middle for your boy, the Louisville Indiana series up in Gamebridge on December 6th? I'll
I
let
mean, if
you
you're giving me the choice,
do have it. You
I
have
think you
Trace
know where I'm
Jackson
going
Davis,
with it. Yeah.
New Jersey behind you, it looks like. So, okay. So, yeah, we could start there, but let's do that. So, when you saw that news, I love it. That's kind of where I'll start. I mean, obviously, I know you're a fan of both schools, being a graduate of IU, but I mean, this definitely is a perfect game. It makes a ton of sense. Hopefully, it goes longer than more than
Yeah.
just 1 year, which I got to have my doubts about and I'm a little concerned about. But what say you about the series that's being renewed up in Gamebridge?
I mean, thank God they finally got it together to where they're going to play in either the states of Kentucky or Indiana. I mean, seriously, guys, the two schools are less than 2 hours apart. They've met 6 times in the past 10 seasons, and they've played at Madison Square Garden more than anywhere else during that stretch. They've played in the Bahamas during that stretch. Why are we not playing this in the Yum Center, Assembly Hall, or Gainbridge Fieldhouse? It's so easy, guys. Like, the two schools are so close. It's such an easy drive. The fan bases are both extremely passionate. Let's play this at a place where they can go and see the teams play. And I'm glad they're finally getting back to doing that by playing in Gainbridge Fieldhouse this upcoming season. And now, yes, I do hope it's more than a 1 year thing. I hope they start some type of home and home after this, where we can get them in the Yum Center, get them back up in Bloomington in Assembly Hall. But it's a great start to that, because there's no reason that these two teams shouldn't be playing each other consistently and shouldn't be playing each other in places where the fan bases can get to see the games.
Now with the football game, I know that was a hot topic around here. Obviously, that game was canceled, or they're not doing it there. Does this feel like a? I don't know. Is it feel like they're like, hey, we're trying to make that wrong right here with
No.
this? But okay, it just feels like that they're close. Okay, I didn't think so either. I didn't know
And
if I was reaching.
honestly, it feels like, and this is where I'm still in the mud. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not as much in the mud as I used to be when I
Right,
was at the
you're
station.
removed from it, yeah.
So like I see some of that, and I just kind of laugh, to be honest, because I'm like I think it's just different entities. I mean, it's basketball versus football, and Indiana very much doesn't view those two things in the same light, despite them kind of becoming more serious on the football side with the year Signetti had last year, to where they're just not really viewing those two things in the same light. I don't think, to where I think it's just two separate entities, to be honest. Like,
Yeah,
I know a lot of Louisville fans are trying to tie the two between them. And if they would have gone to the Yum Center first, that would have been great. Whatever. I would love to see that game. I'd love to see him again in Bloomington and Indy. It doesn't really matter to me. We just play the game somewhere around the fan bases. But to the people that said they should have come to Louisville first, whatever. It's
right,
kind of where
right.
I'm at. Yeah.
That hurts. Yeah, that goes. I'm completely with you on that. It's like, who cares where they play? That's just an asinine. Just
Yeah, the thought
line
that
of
you shouldn't add that game in basketball because Indiana chickened out of the football series is kind of ridiculous to me, to be
no.
honest.
I'm with you on that. Now, okay, so you got DeVries that's up there. That I think this is one of those things that it's. We talked about this a lot when it looked like it was trending in the direction. And when the news broke about Mike Woodson going up there, or stepping down, I should say. And then it was the same. It was kind of the Spider-Man meme with Pat Kelsey and what everyone was able to kind of see coming from a mile away with like the times are kind of a changing around here with that. So what do you make of DeVries in his first few weeks on the job? I know he's kind of doing the media tour. I know Blankenbaker went on a flamethrower this week talking about hey, you're shopping at Liquor Barn for exciting whites in the transfer portal.
He is.
From that. So
He
what do you
definitely
make early on? I want to send one of our producers. He's supposed to be speaking at the Huber's winery coming up here, I think, in the next month or so. And I want to send him one of our producers there to be journalism, like a position you used to do. But I don't know if they have the same chutzpah that one Jack Grossman has for that. So what do you make of his first few weeks, months on the job?
You know, they're not going to give up and ask him just about the Kentucky series.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. No.
I always credit Mike Pratt for that because I was probably going to whip out, but then I asked him at halftime. I ran into him at the game, and he told me I had to do it. So I love Mike Pratt, miss Mike Pratt, but
yeah, I love that he gave you the little boost of confidence in order to do that. That
very inside baseball for people listening to Floyd Street's Finest.
Right. Yeah, yes. So I said I want to do a thing on ESPN Louisville Sports Talk radio over the summer. It's like called Behind the Bit, because imagine I try to put myself like we're in it, we're in the trenches, and you're a little removed from this too. And I promise we'll get back to the DeVries question, but sometimes I feel as if like we're the only ones, like we're in the clubhouse, and if a semi truck driver's driving through Spaghetti Junction, and it's like, oh, I wonder what sports talk radio's here, and they hear the Billy Reed big deal and the Dieter meltdown of like, what do they think when they hear this? Like, I don't get it. So I kind of want to go back through like just our Dropbox and just do a segment like whenever somebody gets like on political talk, and it's like, oh boy, we're going down a wrong rabbit hole here, and we just play some music, and it's just called Behind the Bit, and we just spin a wheel, and it's like, hey, the Stormy Daniels
get a better dog.
Get a better dog. Exactly. Little things like that where it just kind of says, okay, this is the reason behind it. Locke was saying your dog's soft if it freaks out at fireworks over the 4th of July. I think this is a great summertime sports talk segment or bit, but like most things in the imaging of what else is going on, I'll get to it one of these days. But DeVries, you tell me, man. So like, have you been impressed? Have you been knocking it? Has he knocked it out of the park in the eyes of Jack Grossman, or has it just been ho-hum?
It's been fine. I mean, we talked about this both on the podcast and when I've made appearances on the station, how they were never going to get a big name guy kind of following the mold of the Louisville search, the Kentucky search, that type of stuff. So if you get a dude that understands modern roster construction and modern basketball, has a winning track record, is on the younger side. That's all I really wanted from that standpoint. And DeVries checks all three of those boxes off, which is good. It's been a little slow in the few weeks since they've hired him, to be completely honest. He still hasn't completely put his staff together yet. There's been a couple guys that he's named, but they're still trying to round that out. And they haven't been like Pat Kelsey to where he has the roster completely put together at this point, pretty much. He's still waiting on Ahmet, obviously, for his decision, and they got to figure out the Case and Pryor side of things as well to solidify the front court. But Indiana only has 3 guys on the roster right now. So they still have a lot of work to do in the portal. So it's pretty much an incomplete grade for his first offseason at this point, but a lot of potential, a lot of high hopes, and hopefully he's able to build the same way he did at West Virginia and Drake at IU, because it seems like that he knows what he's doing. It just, we got to see the proof now over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and I think that's just kind of the wait and see approach. It's the same thing.
It was the same thing that Kentucky fans are doing before they went big in the portal this past week. Indiana fans are getting restless and all that stuff, and it's like, you gotta see what happens here the next few weeks. If they still only have 3 guys on the roster on May 5th and one of them's his son, yeah, go ahead, panic. But it's the middle of April right now. You got to get going, and they got the Wilkerson kid coming or on a visit this weekend, whatever it is. That would be a huge one, and they got a couple other guys too. You got to land them. You got to seal the deal on them. But we just got to see what happens at this point.
Well, and it's funny you bring that up. To bring it back to Louisville, I talked about this. I can't remember. I've done so much fill-in stuff with Nikki V and Lieberman and Mark Ennis. I think it was with Mark Ennis we were talking about with like the native men stuff that's out there, and I know that's more so local to the Louisville, Kentuckies of the world, probably more Louisville, Duke, and Arkansas. If you go from the recruiting gurus that are out there, I think we had Paul Biancardi on earlier this week, fresh off the McDonald's All-American game, talking about some of the things that he was looking at, what he was hearing. However, it's funny, and you know that I used to be all in on the recruiting worlds, and I'm not going to fake take it like I have my finger on the pulse like I used to. But it's funny because Ennis brought up a really good point of like, there's not really a good way to say like to take your foot off the gas of like, hey, we're not recruiting that guy anymore. And I think there can only be one winner. And I thought that was a good point. It's like the coaches can leak some things out there to say, hey, we're not necessarily going after this guy as much in it. They've cooled off. They'll put something cryptic out there. But if the player still puts his top four up there, the schools, and they choose Duke, it's going to be perceived as if they missed out on the kid to Duke or Arkansas, wherever he's out there. But the theme around here, at least with the native case and prior dynamic that I know you alluded to, like what they're going to do, it's kind of like they've cooled off a little bit. And I know that's kind of that changed the tone versus a month ago when a former colleague of ours, and I know you're in a group chat with him, Mitchell Hannigan, got everybody in a tizzy about the fan stake stuff, which is just so inside baseball. Like it went over my head. And like I'm like in my 30s, and I'm like, I can only imagine what like a 70 or 80-year-old is doing for that. So I guess going back to that, like with the case in prior stuff that you brought up, like we were joking around, he's almost putting out these cryptic tweets, and
He
it's
is
like,
putting out cryptic tweets.
and it's like, is he listening to this? Is he listening to some emo band, or is he listening to some song, or watching some Netflix and chill, or is like he gets one anonymous person with like big card fan 6574789 underscore asterisk on Twitter that said something mean to him, and he's using that as the haters and the motivation. But what say you, man? I mean, like I think like kind of like the Javon Hadley stuff that's been out there. You can't really put a number on necessarily, like I'm sure they probably can with the 502 circle. They probably did in order to get Javon Hadley back. But somebody like Case and Pryor, who coming off an injury, I understand like players may be a little bit different coming off that injury, and fans may view him a little bit different, but putting a number in a ease of like, hey, he knows like what the culture is, as cliche as that sounds. I think that kind of goes a long way too, as knowing what to build Pat Kelsey's culture, moniker he keeps talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you definitely would love to have either one of those guys to solidify the front court. But here's the beautiful thing: even if you miss out on Dana Met, which it sounds like they're probably going to do at Case and Pryor, where to leave, there's this thing called the transfer portal. You can go get another guy. You would probably rather have Pryor there. Not probably, you would absolutely rather have Pryor there for the retention year over year. Someone who already knows the system, is familiar with the coaching staff and the other returnees and all that stuff. But push comes to shove, there's a lot of different ways to get winning players these days. And the transfer portal is one of those ways to where, yes, again, you would rather have Case and Pryor, but it's not like you can't go out and get another power forward who's productive, who can play the role that you need Case and Pryor to play. But the question is, can you get him? Can you make it work on the money side? Yeah, obviously, those are all important questions, but this isn't. And kind of the example I used when I was on with Strebel, and I think I said this on with Ennis as well, so getting the full car wash was, if you remember when Kentucky and Duke were both going after Marquise Bolden about a decade ago, and both teams needed a big man. He was the highest uncommitted prospect at the time, and it became all the resources, everything went to that one kid. You have to land that kid or else you're screwed. And Duke ended up getting Marcus Bolden. He ended up not being a great player. He was just kind of inflated because he was the only dude that hadn't committed yet. But that thing dragged into May or June, and that was the number one offseason story for Kentucky basketball for a long time there. But you look at it now, and you say, yeah, Nate Ament's there, who's way, way higher rated than Marquise Bolden, would probably be a better college player than Marquise Bolden. However, if you don't get him, or if you don't get Case and Pryor, it's not the end-all be-all that it used to be because of the portal and because of the NIL money Louisville's been flinging around. You have options here to where you want to make it work. You always would rather retain the guy that's already on the roster in Case and Pryor. But it's not a Marquise Bolden situation where you're just kind of screwed at that spot if you don't end up keeping him. You have options if you're Louisville and Pat Kelsey.
Yeah, and look, I mean,
It's where the leverage has switched from it used to be completely on the player or the recruit to now it's as much as the player movement and all that stuff has benefited the players in a lot of ways. In this specific case, I think the leverage is actually on the school side, and the coach's side, which is something we don't see very often in college basketball these days.
And I think you hit the nail on the head from the standpoint of, the times are changing from the standpoint of, the player leverage that is there. However, I'm sure, and we've heard about this with agents and others reaching out to them. So they're probably, although not in the transfer portal, testing their market value, dare I say, to see what's out there. So look, I mean, I think getting Javon Hadley back, and I'm assuming, you haven't heard anything yet, but Kenai Roots is by all accounts is coming back. I don't know. This is where we have to kind of recalibrate our minds of like, does a player have to put out a video each time in order to like completely
it is
100%,
wild. Yeah.
100% solidify?
Why
that
do they need to put
back?
out a roster on like gocards.com?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I don't know. I would say that tongue in cheek, but kind of also serious, but also, and I know it's just kind of like a superlative at the end of the year to bridge to get there. And I know the transfer portal isn't even closed yet, but when you look at the way too early top 25s that have been out there, look, man, like we talk about this all the time. You don't want the college footballness to seep over into the sport of college basketball, but those matter, man. Just kind of in the subconscious of like just national media writers, like Louisville is a brand that has taken a hit. And now if you are perceived way too early top 25 by a lot of the national basketball bennies, like, I'm sorry, you'll never not convince me like that matters. And I understand it all comes down to quad one wins and your net rankings and whatnot there. But in terms of just the PR component of like sending a message of everything that you've had to go through the last 7 to 8 years, it is a feather in your cap that I think a lot of Louisville fans desperately wanted to see and desperately helped the psyche to see him in ESPN. John Fantas, no On Three had him way down there, which is a whole discussion out there. If you know the battle with On Three, we love it when they hoist them up, but when they poop on them, they're controlled by KSR.
It is hilarious.
It is, man. It makes me laugh. But I mean, like, I think it's just been a 180 in terms of the psyche that a lot of Louisville fans desperately needed after what's transpired here.
Right. I don't think it means as much as it does in college football from the standpoint of when you're ranked that high in college football, you just get every benefit of the doubt.
Right.
With that in basketball, you still have to earn it to some degree, but it does set a level of expectation that just hasn't been there for Louisville for about a decade, which is really a good thing to have because you want those expectations when you're at a place like Louisville. That's the type of teams you're wanting to be building. As much fun as this past year was, where Louisville virtually came out of nowhere to be an 8 seed, made the ACC title game 18-2 in league, all that stuff. Incredible. But the overachieving thing, that's not the goal every year for Louisville. That they want to be ranked high in the preseason, meet or exceed those expectations, as difficult as that is to do, then do it again the next year. That's what this is about. So when Louisville's as high as number 3 in like Fanta's top 25 or Borzello's top 25, that's like, yeah, it's about time they're back to that point.
Yeah.
It's good. And that's a huge credit to Pat Kelsey, his staff, and the players on the roster that he's been able to recruit and retain to get them to that point that quickly in year 2. But it's still something like that's the expectation. Not that you're going to be ranked 3rd every year in these way too early preseason top 25s, but you're going to be relevant. You want to be in that top 15 every single year. Give yourself that fighting chance to where going into the season, if you're looking at a team like in Indiana, who they just scheduled with, or a St. John's, which that rumor's been going out there, they go, okay, we're playing a really damn good basketball team here. We're challenging ourselves with this, which opens up more opportunities for Louisville and Pat Kelsey, which we've seen year 1 and year 2 at the Tennessee game last year, going to Atlantis last year, and now scheduling IU and according to Rick Pitino, St. John's. Obviously, the Kentucky game's going to be there as well as ACC, SEC challenge.
You said Tennessee, you cut out for a second. You said Tennessee too, right?
Yeah, Tennessee last year.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, but that's a home and home, so they'll be in Knoxville.
Oh, yeah. They are in Knoxville.
So,
yep, I forgot about that. Yes.
Yeah. So,
yes.
no, to your point, like, no, I think that's something that
I may have to go to that one.
Yeah, right. How far is that for you?
That's I did, and this is going to be a very sad statement. I went up there when Indiana scrimmaged Tennessee in October. This past year, it's about a 3.5 hour drive.
God,
I
you
had
have
the
an
day off
illness.
work.
It's a
Yep.
good illness, but I love that oh
What
so
what
much
I will
about you.
never understand, and this and the fact that Arkansas beat Duke, or not Duke, Arkansas beat Purdue 2 years ago, with Musselman's last team before they were terrible, and Purdue was obviously the second best team in the country. Indiana won that game in Knoxville, which makes absolutely no sense, knowing what both of those teams did the
Right.
rest of the year. Which is
Just so crazy. Yeah, I mean, just where, yeah. But I mean, look, I mean, that's the beauty of just kind of these. I think they should televise them and try to make it some sort of NIL,
yeah.
thing for these guys as the balloon keeps going. By the way, that's something that kind of flew under the radar yesterday too, or I'm sorry, earlier this week, I should say, when Eric Crawford was putting out about the Pat Kelsey extension. Basically, he's just saying probably the first time I've heard Josh Hurd talk about athletic association meeting about anticipating further conference realignment shifts when the TV contracts run out, also working to position Louisville to be on the right side of that shift. So that's something that's out there
It's
as,
basically them admitting the ACC's toast, right?
I mean, that's kind of like what I took away from it, or it's going to look very much different from whether that's a merger with the Big 12 in some capacity, but
The
kind
ACC
of
Big East basketball merger that Coach K and others have talked
yeah,
about.
Petito. I mean, they got
Yeah.
some heavy hitters, but I just have no idea. I'm not going to
Here's,
pretend how
here's
they
my
would make that
thing,
work.
and like I'm not gonna just dismiss it because I think that I'm really intrigued by the idea. And the Big East obviously doesn't operate this way because they don't have football, but for the rest of major college athletics, the way that it's kind of worked here, unfortunately to me, as a huge basketball guy, you as well, Phil, is that the football, as we all know, drives everything here. So to me, it'd be kind of weird to see the ACC and the Big East align when it's been the football and the football money that's driven so much of this. That's kind of the only pause I have on that.
Well, Sneaky kind of flew under the radar, though, man. Like, I think it was a big deal. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's a really
Kevin
big
Willard,
deal.
but also the Kevin Willard component of like a guy that wanted to be in a basketball centric conference. Like, for him moving out of the mighty Big Ten, and you can talk about the stability of not having an AD there, not getting the funding, not being able to stay an extra night in New York, but he left a football driven conference for a basketball centric conference. And look, I'm not going to make it like Villanova is a bottom feeder there. They've had success. They haven't been what they've been in the past, but I mean, they are one of
But
the,
they're a top. Well, like we talk about Louisville as being like a top 6, 7, 8 program of all time. Villanova's right there with them.
yeah, no, and it's crazy. It was funny. I think it was Rothstein went on a massive rant about it. I know we're kind of getting off there, but I was like, oh man, because like you just ultimately think of Villanova and Jay Wright and the success they had, and then he goes back to like '85 talking about there. It's like that was like a Cinderella run there, and before that, you've had sprinkles of success on there, but they were like a very low seed on there. So
Right,
you
but
gotta
also between like 2015 and J. Wright retiring, I'd argue they were absolutely the best program in college
Oh,
basketball.
absolutely. But it's just like in terms of just like all this history out there. But that's how quick. But it's also managing expectations of like if Kevin Willard's getting you to the Sweet 16 year in and year out, like that's a really good job.
Yeah,
It's just not Jay Wright.
I also don't think there's that type of pressure at Villanova to where you look at a
Was it in
Louisville.
Maryland, you think, though? Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. I didn't know if you were like
Yeah,
comparing the job to Maryland
no, no,
on. Yeah,
no,
no,
no. I'm
I'm with you.
comparing it because like we just talked about with Pat Kelsey, for instance. It's like, yeah, great year one, but you need to do better than that long term.
Right.
And Mark Pope, same thing. You made the Sweet 16, great. If you do that again next year, that's not good enough.
No, I'm with you.
But at Villanova, not to say Villanova fans aren't passionate, but they aren't living and breathing with college basketball 365 days a year like they do in the state of Kentucky, in the city of Louisville, in the state of Indiana. That they don't do that. There's the Sixers, there's the Eagles, there's the Phillies. I mean, that's why Jay Wright loved that job so much. He could go chill on the beach for a week in the summer, and no one cared.
Yeah.
They tune into Villanova basketball in the middle of February. Well, oh yeah, the top five again, good, whatever. I mean, yeah, Kevin Willard's gonna have to win to some level. but I don't think he needs to be in the Final Four every year.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the psyche of just some coaches are wired a little bit differently where they need to have their ego stroked on to be the it thing. I think the guys of like Rick Pitino, maybe not.
Calipari.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but he with Arkansas for that. But yeah, there's folks out there that definitely need that to happen. Well, that's a perfect transition. He's Jack Grossman. I'm Phil Baker. You're listening to the Sunday Morning Hangover / Field of 68. We're doing a joint show for this, so I appreciate everyone putting that out there on those platforms. If you want to interact with us, it's at ESPN 680, at Jack Grossman 97. I am Phil __ Baker. We'll talk a little bit about the spring football game coming up here in a bit as well, with Louisville taking on Louisville. So there you go with that. Also, I wanted to, this is the perfect transition when we talk about just kind of the moving around of some of the coaches. Pat Kelsey, the U of L athletic board, has decided to give Pat Kelsey a $1 million per year raise, bringing it up to about $3.3 million per year. The contract runs through the 2030 season. And Jack, I don't know how much you saw on Twitter yesterday, or whenever the news came out about this.
I would say, first of all, interesting that it goes through 2030 because if I'm not wrong, that's around the same time frame that a lot of, not the ACC, but going back to what you're talking about with Josh Hurd, that's around the same time a lot of the conference TV rights deals are up.
Yeah, it's right in that window. I've seen anywhere between 20. I know the Big Ten and the SEC have much shorter windows with the goals of kind of building those up. However, I know the ACC, I think like there's an opt out in maybe 2032, but I think it goes through 2036. Yes, 6 or 7.
2036 is when the granted rights ends.
Yeah, and then I think around the 2030-ish mark is like when it's like that cost analysis of like, okay, well, we'll pay it, like whatever that fine is in order to do it. So that's going to be fascinating to be. And then also we talked about it a little bit. Mark Pope kind of got a little bump there as well. That kind of flew under the radar earlier this week.
That automatic 1-year extension.
Yes, Kentucky Mark Pope received an automatic 1-year extension after the Wildcats made the Sweet 16, according to a team official. Pope's contract runs through, as you pointed out, the 2030 season with a $250,000 increase the final year. I bring this up from the standpoint, and we know our buddy Strebel's a terrorist when it comes to this, but the optics of this and the job and the amount of money, and I got to be honest, I'm looking at the text line too. There was a bunch of people, 437-9680 UPS Jobs text line. I saw PK's contract extension. Is $1 million of raise enough? That's just kind of whenever I search raise or extension on there, there's a handful of those things out there. What did you make of it? And I want you to go first because I don't want to guide you one way or another, but just the optics of it and the Louisville job of Pat Kelsey getting that raise, but also maybe not on the caliber of what a lot of people thought he was going to get.
I mean, I thought it was fine, to be completely honest. I mean, again, incredible year one. That's not the Louisville basketball standard still, though. And at some point, it wasn't like it would have been different if, let's say, Indiana, because they were by far the biggest job open in the job cycle, tried to hire Pat Kelsey. I'm not saying Pat Kelsey would have left, but there would have been real leverage for him to play that for a bigger raise. People weren't coming probably because Pat Kelsey's only been here for 1 year,
right?
But they weren't. He wasn't really the name that was mentioned in this coaching cycle at all. And a lot of that is mainly because Louisville is, again, a top 6, 7, 8 job in the country. So he's not going to leave a lot of places, but you look at the contract of $2.3 million a year, now $3.3 million a year. That's something that would, in theory, be payable, to where at some point, if Pat Kelsey keeps having the success that he's had at the start, and he keeps building and growing on that year one success, they're going to have to keep re-upping that deal. But to be honest, like, he's been there 1 year, incredible year one, but he was an 8 seed, made the tournament. Great job. You give him, you give him a bump, but you don't. I don't think you should be giving him 6, 7 million yet. He's got to prove that still, and that's not an indictment on Kelsey. I think he's going to be able to prove that starting with this team this next year. But you don't need to be going full Tom Jurge and handing a guy way too much money and backing yourself into a corner. Like, they've done that many times before. And I think Josh Hurd's kind of, I don't want to say learning from that because we've had some time. We've had a good amount of time removed from it, but I just don't think you need to be doing that at this stage. There hasn't been a reason given for you to have to overpay at this point. So it's smarter to me to use that money to allocate into roster building in the transfer portal, which Louisville's done. I think that's a smarter use of their cash at this point in time than to be giving Pat Kelsey a contract that would be great for him, but not necessarily the best thing for the university yet. A key word is yet, because he has
Yeah.
plenty of time to earn that paycheck, and he ends up in the Sweet 16 Elite Eight next year. Yeah, then go ahead and give him the huge ass raise, but or like if another job opens up at North Carolina's looking at him, yes, give him the huge ass raise. But I just don't think there was the reason to do that. You give him a bump because extraordinary year one, but you don't need to be going like $7-8 million a year.
I completely agree, and I think we kind of we talk about the recalibration of our minds of the transfer portal. I guess that's my bingo word of the day that we're going to keep going back to, recalibration of trying to get does a player need to come out from the roster side of things and say like I'm coming back like Javon Hadley, or it just kind of flies under the radar like Roots. Maybe by all accounts it looks like he is coming back, and that could change by the time we're off the show. But I think from the standpoint of when you had the Tom Jurges of the world that would have the being hoisted up as we're the most profitable athletic department out there, and it's like basically bragging about how much money they were bringing in, and then you had the Bobby Petrino buyout, you had the Kenny Payne buyout that they are still paying.
Chris Mack took a deal.
The Chris Mack took a deal. Rick Pitino, by all accounts, you said, hey, I'm not doing it, but you lucked out there. But I think you're 100% right. I think they're operating in a different scope over there. And I know some that want to throw shade tend to say that that is on the, side of being cheap or frugal or whatnot.
Well, I think the side of having to be smart with your money, too, because, again, like I know Louisville's had the big bump in NIL, but you're still in the ACC. There's still a big gap there. That money has to be made up somewhere. And again, long term, that's probably not the answer of Pat Kelsey. But for right now, in the short term, that's fine. No, you don't need to overreact to some things. Like Nate Oates in Alabama has that huge ass buyout. You know when he got that huge out buyout? When people tried to hire him.
Right.
When Bruce Pearl got that huge ass raise and the huge buyout and the deal where his son's the coach and waiting at Auburn, well, Louisville tried to hire him. You don't need to do that until there's a necessity to make that move. Instead, use that money, that much bigger but still not unlimited resource, to fund your basketball team, to help fund the football team, to fund other sports. Like, guys, you don't have an unlimited resource here. It's okay to use it to fund the players and to get the roster, to give Pat Kelsey the best shot he can get to go earn an even bigger paycheck.
Completely agree. And I think, it was a discussion point earlier this week in the news that was circulating out, is that you look at USA Today's, top men's basketball head coaching salaries. Okay. You got Bill Self making over $8.6 million, total pay 8.8. John Calipari coming in second at 8 million. Dan Hurley at 7.7. Tom Izzo, 6.1. Mick Cronin. Sneaky,
yeah. What have all of those guys done? I mean, I'll say this. Like, I love my guy Strebel. But like even Mick Cronin's made a Final Four, but
yeah, right.
But I mean, like if they put Pat Kelsey in that group and he's making $7 million a year, so what would Strebel be saying?
Exactly.
You're paying him that much money for a first round exit.
Exactly. It's like, the lock pivot. We need to come up with a Strebel little. The data spin. Has the Strebel spin. The data's changed, but right now he's right at at the time when this came out, it was at 2.3. Now it's up to 3.3, the $1 million raise, which is putting him up at a different light. But also, it kind of goes under the radar. If you look at these contracts in depth and the amount of bonuses they can get up, I mean, you're going up to, if he gets coaches of the year, making it to the Sweet 16. You just saw Mark Pope. I mean, anywhere he can make up to almost an additional $700,000 in incentives base out there.
I think DeVries gets a bonus just for making the bleeping NCAA tournament.
You're freaking Indiana. Like,
come on, guys.
And it's the same thing that you saw last year with Kevin Keats making it to the Final Four of the automatic extension. It's like, you want to prepare yourself. Obviously, these coaches, they want to, their agents are negotiating these in the sense of like, look, I mean, the shelf life on these things in terms of, it not working happens more often than not from out there. So I think when you see somebody like Kevin Keats, who went to the Final Four, but, kind of made it a little awkward for them because it's like they wanted to move on from that. That's kind of how the Louisville is operating. And look, I don't want to.
Right. I don't want to view it as like, well, you got to get out from Pat Kelsey if it doesn't work, because by all accounts, they're not going to be in that spot.
Absolutely. No, I'm 100% with you. But and I didn't take it as that, but I think we just kind of have to adjust the way, like it isn't 15 years ago where it's just an
Right.
unlimited piggy bank and
Plus,
you just sort of
plus you also have to look through the lens of it's different from like when they first hired Pat Kelsey. I think you could have made the argument a little bit more effectively of, hey, they're paying $2.3 million for their coach. Are they taking this seriously? All that stuff. Obviously, it ended up being a home run and working, but
but he was also making 750,000 too. So
right.
it's like to make it seem like he's not making like
right,
a
but the
significant amount of
difference
money.
is because you could say, well, you're bringing in a new guy. You have to buy that equity, buy that loyalty, whatever word you want to say. He's already here. He already knows what it's like. Like I don't think you need to upcharge what you've already been paying him a huge amount. Reward him for overachieving year one, which they did, but let's not be ridiculous about things. And I think Louisville did a really good job of that. And I'm sure Pat Kelsey, as a dude who was making $700,000 at Charleston, got the bump to $2.3 million. That's a huge bump, and to $3.3 million. I'm sure he's perfectly happy with $3.3 million at this
Well,
stage of life. Now, if North Carolina were to fire Hubert Davis next year and offer him $6 million a year, then yeah, you got to pony up even more to keep him. But those are all hypotheticals at the moment. But I don't think you need to be overly proactive at this stage.
no, I'm with you, and I think we've talked about this maybe about I don't know, throughout the times where you've joined, whether it be on our shows or we join in your podcast on the Field of 68 podcast now, where he's Jack Grossman, I'm Phil Baker. I think one of the things we tend to go back to is this whole notion of like, okay, this is in the hierarchy of the sport. This is what this job is worth, and there's something that comes with it optics wise, and I think that's off a little bit because now the landscape's changed from the standpoint of like I break it hyper local here with Louisville. They have the university, the donation to the athletic department that's out there. You also have their marketing extension. We talk about Learfield, and for Kentucky it's JMI, and I think it's Learfield up in Indiana as well.
It is.
So you have that. On top of that, you have these collectives, which I know is trending in the direction where we'll all be under one roof of that. I know for a fact, like, and I'm not putting this out there, that there are businesses around the community that have been hit up and they're confused. And I get it. Like, this is the job of where they're trying to kind of navigate the water. And this isn't the dunk on any of those entities out there, but they are hit up by said entities for three separate things.
Well, yeah, this is to me the biggest issue of college sports at the moment is how they're paying the players and how separate it is from the universities themselves.
Right, they can't rock the team logos on there. If you've seen like stuff that's been out there, if they're not an official partner of the university, it's blurred out. Like in some of the,
I mean, like even the big Nike commercial that was airing during March Madness, the NCAA tournament, you had Cooper Flagg in the Duke uniform, but then they would show and then they would show Paige Beckers in a jersey, but they would have the UConn whited out on it.
Yeah,
it's like school by school. You got to Nike school too, so I don't know why they weren't able to make that work, but it clearly was a thing that happened there. But I think what's frustrating, like especially from a fan side of things, from a local business side of thing, trying to sponsor players and the school and all that stuff. Fans are paying all this money for tickets. They're paying all this money to donations to the athletic fund, and that's not actually going to the players. Instead, you got to do, and this isn't, I'm not trying to, crap on 502 Circle or any of these collectives who are using the way it's set up and using it effectively for them. I think the setup's not the problem, not the collectives themselves.
Right.
To where you're already paying all that doesn't go to the players. Now you got to donate to the 502 collective on top of it just for NIL, or else you're a bad fan.
Yeah.
Because you're not helping the team. That's ridiculous, man. Like the schools who make, and I'm hoping the thought was that the House settlement would fix some of this, at least with the revenue sharing and all that stuff, but it's still just so wild west out there. There's no way to enforce it, and on top of the 20 million for revenue sharing, there's going to be NIL, so just nothing's really going to change. Unfortunately, it seems like. But to me, you have to be able to funnel this through all the money, the tens of hundreds of millions of dollars these schools are making off of TV contracts. And these schools are claiming that they're non-revenue, income to where they're saying, okay, we have to spend every single dollar that's coming in, but we can't spend them on the players. We can't do that. We have just finding new and ridiculous and asinine ways to spend the money so that they can play and claim poor, and ask these collectives to go out and to fans and donors and boosters and all that stuff to raise money to field a competitive roster. It's asinine. Like it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. And I'm all for the players getting paid. They should get paid. But you know what? How they should be getting paid? The fact that ESPN and ABC's giving Louisville $35 million dollars or whatever it is every year. The fact that Fox is giving Big Ten schools $90 million dollars or whatever it is. That should be the basis of how these schools are paid. If you buy season tickets, you donate to the Cardinal Athletic Fund, that should be going to the roster.
No, I
That's
think,
how this should be done. Like
and
that,
I think that's what they're trending toward. Like
that's what
with
they're
this,
trying to do. But how do you rein that in?
no, I'm with you. I know they have that
Yeah,
Deloitte and the NCAA settlement thing that is slated to come out. I know Greg Sankey said that's going to get delayed, and whenever Sankey gets involved, Emperor Sankey, something
yeah.
is going to be nefarious about. But I'm totally with you. I think Tennessee was operating or trending in this direction of like they were going to have like I'm drawing a blank 7 to 12% ticket increase, and if it's out of sight, out of mind, if like Ken Grossman, your dad, we're giving him a shout out, Kenny G, shout out, if he's over here trying to get, the season tickets that I know you all have for many,
Yeah.
many years, and it's like, okay, the product was good, it's gone up a little bit, and you just do a one-time
And,
donation out there.
and to Ken Grossman and really my mom was the big force behind this. They kept the season tickets through the Kenny Payne era. They didn't
God
get rid
bless
of
them.
them.
They deserve.
They went to games, which good on
But
them, man.
hazard
But
pay, they deserve to have like their names embroidered in the seats at the KFC Yum Center, whatever it's out there. But I think from the standpoint of if Kenny G gets that donation call, email, the thing in the mail about say it's going there, and it's like, hey, they had a successful year, it's going up, 5 to 10%, and it's out of sight, out of mind, and 5 to 10% of that goes to the 502 Circle and Collective. I think fans are good with that. They just
yeah,
don't want to be hit up by multiple entities for that. And it's like I took the kiddos to Disney on Ice a couple weeks ago. Okay, you'll love this. So yeah, I'm struggling. I'm still sore from the standpoint of carrying them around, making sure they didn't run
well,
on
was
the
it at the
ice.
Yum Center or
It
Freedom
was at
Hall?
the Yum Center. So you'll love this from the standpoint of trying to get there and try to get you go up there, get the kiddos, candy, and it's like the proceeds, and you want to round up to the next dollar to go to the 502 Circle. And I'm at like 90 cents. And I'm like, what's a dime in the grand
Yeah,
scheme of things? But if you get 20,000 people or the gold through games and other events throughout there, that adds up. I think things like that are, and you need the businesses that are going to help out the 502 circles in order to make it work. But I just think they just need to all be under one roof. And I think it's trending there. And also going back to the Pat Kelsey raise, I think, and I kind of have it on good authority, is that it may be a little less to kind of take care of some of the assistants too. That's out that made the move over for him too. So I'm not trying to put the spit out there, but there's been a couple people that have indicated that there's some stars that have kind of risen on the business, and I think the recruiting and the transfer portal would indicate as much. That they've been focusing on a certain type of player that they want to get here in a higher caliber type of, whether they be already in college or focusing on McDonald's All-Americans or high level guys, that they're trying to take care of a lot of the guys on the staff. And if that's the case, and trying to keep this continuity going, they made the trip, the trek over from Winthrop and Charleston to the University of Louisville. You can kind of see why it may be a little bit lower. Josh Hurd said, hey, the base is going to be a little bit lower, incentive base, but we're going to take care of some of your coaches too. And like the guy, Pat Kelsey, I know there was that infamous quote that from a press conference earlier in the year. I think CL Brown, our buddy, asked the question. And was like, and I forget the actual question, but it was along the lines like, dude, I wear pajamas. My wife's hot. My kid's healthy. Like, he doesn't take himself too serious, and I'm sure if North Carolina, you pointed out, came to him and was like, hey, $6 million, it's like, professionally, you got to listen to him
yeah.
and you got to take it to your employer. But a guy that was making 750,000 or 725 a year ago at Collins Charleston, moving it over to the standpoint of, hey, you're making 3.3 million now. Let's not make it out to be like the guy's not taken care of too. So I also kind of want to view it through that prism.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's something where you got to listen to it professionally, but you got to wait for a reason to go to that number. You don't need to just jump there immediately. I mean, like, to go back to the Tom Church days, I mean, Louisville got caught in a couple bad buyouts, like we've talked
Absolutely.
about, but also, You think of a guy like Charlie Strong, who they proactively gave a huge raise to before he even hit his stride, and made George look like a genius for a couple of years there. But despite all that, you say you do that to earn the loyalty and all that stuff. Charlie Strong saying he wasn't cut like that, that he still ends up at Texas.
Yeah.
There's only so much you can do in some of these cases. And Louisville basketball obviously a much more prominent job historically than Louisville football, but so we're talking two different jobs a little bit from that standpoint. But I just think they did the right thing. I think they handled the raise fine. Like whatever. But I'm with you as far as like 502 circle and all that stuff. Wrap it into the tickets. Instead of having it be a Cardinal Athletic Fund donation, have it be a 502 circle donation.
Yeah.
Easy. Why not do that? Or have the Cardinal Athletic Fund be able to, have both of them merge to where you're using that pool of money to pay the players and also, rebuild facilities for the 80th time. And it's not that Louisville's not the only school to be doing that. Everyone does that. But it's like it goes back to just the model for me of college athletics of them claiming they're non-revenues. So they just keep expanding, renovating everything over and over again that doesn't always need to be renovated every 5 minutes. Right. Unless, of course, it's the Kentucky basketball facility with Calipari, all that stuff.
Yeah, I think, well, did you see the news that came out about Mark Pope
That's
apparently
sitting
at the right? I still think the best thing that John Calipari could have done as the final, turning of the knife to Mitch Barnhart is to make it Shaden Sharp Court, the Joe Kraft Center at the practice facility there, or Jared Vanderbilt have his signature on the court. That just, all the people, the guys that never played. Shaden Sharp would be the Mona Lisa of it all.
It really would be.
That is my dream.
You need him to sign the cord that it says the embodiment of Kentucky basketball, Shaden Sharp.
the greatest night ever was when that's
when Shaden Sharp was drafted.
Yes.
What count the Yankees game during that?
I want to say, I think he dipped out. I think that's a good pull by you.
He dipped out and went to the Yankees game.
Yeah, that's pretty hubris all day. All right, Jackie boy, before we get you out of here, I know it's a bittersweet time of the year for you. College basketball is coming to or came to a close, I should say, with Florida winning the national championship over Houston. I know you got a lot of thoughts about that, but we can talk about the Final Four and what transpired with Duke. We can talk about Houston being up at the championship game, but I won't lead you one way or another. I know you've kind of been on a bunch of airwaves this week, so just initial takeaways and what was a great college basketball season.
Yeah, look, I'll say this. Duke, to me, is still the most fascinating part of all this, to be completely honest. Because I was very much on the page of it, and Coach Leamer and I talked a lot about this on the podcast last week before the Final Four. I thought Duke was the best team, but I wasn't ready. The idea of this was just going to be a Duke coronation for a weekend, to me, was pretty ridiculous because of how freaking incredible Houston, Florida, and Auburn also were. Like, it wasn't that those teams weren't good enough to win games too. And I always thought that with Duke, the way it would end would be that they would kind of choke a game away late. But I never thought it would be them having a 14-point lead with 8.5 minutes left and losing that game that way. Once it got to, Emmanuel Sharp hits the three, gets it in a one possession game. I'm like, okay, I wanted to see what would happen when Duke had game pressure on them, because that's something that we had not seen very often. I know I was in the mud on this one. A lot of Louisville fans, a lot of ACC fans got really butthurt over, people kind of blaming the ACC for Duke losing. And that's not the main reason they lost, because you're up 14. They had been in that spot many times before you finished the game off. But Duke, throughout the year, had not had a lot of game pressure on them. And when they did have game pressure on them, they usually lost the games. You look at Houston aside, they couldn't close out Kentucky. They couldn't close out Kansas. Those were the two biggest opportunities they had. Those were both before Thanksgiving. You looked at throughout the rest of the regular season and through the ACC tournament, they only had two other games where they had real game pressure on them at any point. And yes, that's a credit to how great they were and how dominant they were for much of the year, including the NCAA tournament when they dominated a really good team in Alabama in the Elite Eight. But Alabama never put them in a spot to where Duke was nervous.
Right.
So, yes, Duke's the better team. Yes, they can outplay Alabama. But if Alabama was playing their A game and had that game within 2, 3 points with 3, 4 minutes left, I would have loved to have seen if Duke could have closed them out the way they did when with the decisive run when they were already up 10. Like, those are two very different feelings. But you look at the two chances Duke actually had in game pressure in the ACC, Clemson, a game they lost, and North Carolina in the ACC tournament without Cooper Flag, but a game they quite literally needed a Jalen Withers lane violation to survive.
Yeah.
So you look at the 4 times they played one possession games throughout the season. I know Clemson, they ended up losing by 6, but it was one possession with like 8 seconds left.
Right.
The 4 times they played, they only won one of those 4 games. So, and for me, that goes back to, again, Duke having a young team is not why they lost that game, but it was the combination of a young team that hadn't been challenged enough throughout the season. And yes, part of that is the ACC. And yes, part of that's the fact that Illinois was absolutely a dumpster fire when they played them in February at MSG as well. But I look back and I say, yes, Houston was absolutely good enough to beat Duke on any given day. But for Duke to have that game up by 14, that's one of the biggest collapses by a dominant team I can ever remember. And that, to me, is just a lasting image of this Final Four was how the hell up 14 they couldn't win that game.
Well, in the
Insanity.
Tyrese Proctor, yeah. Well, in the Tyrese Proctor, like sneaky, I knew this throughout the season just because he would get moments where he would be, Walter Clayton-esque in SM doing the thing where he would be, we know the elephant in the room that I like to talk about. But the shooting the basketball, but it's sneaky like a poor free throw shooter when Cooper Flag was in transition. I know the still frames are out there for all the degenerate gamblers that had Duke money line in that, and it's just like,
by the way, the over under of that game was 137.5, and it finished at 137.
Yeah,
I'm not allowed to bet through work.
He's winking at me. I'm kidding.
No,
He's not winking. We're on video.
He's
on video.
I'm not winking. Ironically, the only thing I'm really allowed to do is horse gambling because we're not in horse racing. So Derby time coming up, that'll be fun. But I'm not allowed to gamble for work. But I kept telling a buddy like Houston plus 4.5. Houston plus 4.5. Under 137.5. Under 137.5. He didn't take either one, of course, but
my man has basketball injected into his veins. He's telling you, he's giving you the answers to the test. Listen to my man.
Of course, I also liked Houston plus 1.5, and that ended up being
again talking about another. Yeah, we're talking about Duke fizzling out, and Houston being up. Poor Kelvin Sampson.
Yeah, but I think it's okay though to admit, like the ACC was bad, and that played a role with Duke not having the experience they needed for game pressure. Because I know people would say, well, Houston won. They played a lot of close games. Like Florida didn't play a lot of close games before the NCAA tournament. And yes, that's true throughout this season. But the big difference is, one, they did get tested and survived and advanced many times in the NCAA tournament. But two, you had dudes in Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, and Will Richard who had been there before and done that both at Florida and at their previous schools. So it's the combination of, yes, the freshmen, you can win like that, but when the freshmen didn't get those chances either this year or in previous years at the college level to go through those wars and learn how to win close games, yes, the ACC absolutely plays a role in that. And that's something that hopefully the ACC can get better. Schools like, obviously, Louisville taking a big step helps, NC State hiring Will Wade and all that stuff. But to just dismiss the fact, okay, they weren't challenged at all in league, and then they pissed down their leg the one time that they had actual game pressure on them, to me, you can't ignore that.
No, and I'm with you, and I think that's a great lead into to put a bow on this show, or sorry, I should say for your show for the podcast. We'll continue, I believe, next hour. Nick Kern set the joint. We'll react a little bit more to the U of L spring game.
Yeah, I got nothing on that.
Yeah, I was gonna say no, I get it. Also, I had this in my notes app, and I meant to bring it up to you. So a couple days ago, this was something that flew under the radar. Kenny Johnson was just hired.
Yeah, talk about an old name.
Yeah, Kenny Johnson hired for Indiana, a basketball assistant for that. So that was hubris to me, and I know it talked about his ties to Rick Pitino and being key.
Well, it was also, you remember where Rick Pitino hired Kenny Payne or not Kenny Payne, Kenny Johnson from, right?
It was. Did I say Kenny Payne? Kenny Johnson?
No, I said Kenny Payne.
Okay, yeah. Kenny Johnson. It was from Indiana.
It was
correct?
from Indiana. Tom Green staff.
Tom Green,
he did
baby.
the whole. He did the whole. he came over from IU to Louisville and immediately lost 200 pounds.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah,
yep. The
yeah,
Rick
yeah.
Pitino workout. I need that plan.
I think his kid was like playing high school ball here not too long ago. Like even went through all this like sabbatical around that. I think I have that right through all
Yeah,
the
but
nooks
but
and
I mean, we're seeing because Kenny Johnson obviously was wrapped up with the Brian Bowen stuff. We're seeing those guys start to get
laughable.
back into it.
Yes.
Like Book Richardson has a job.
Did I send you the message? I did send you the message. I have a buddy who works in high
Yes,
school
you did send
athletics.
me this. You
You'll
did
love
send me
this.
this.
Listeners will love this. I have a buddy that works at high school athletics, and I am not making this up. I sent this a screenshot. I'm not going to say the school for the sake of it. Basically, I think it was like, hey, it's Christian Dawkins here. I used to do some business in Louisville when he was inquired about a high school kid. If you have a moment, please give me a call. And I was just like, yeah, we know you've done some business,
Yep.
but I said this all the time. We talk about the scheme,
I
and
mean,
that was
Will Wade made the strong ass offer, and he's at NC State now.
yeah. The times are changing for that, but it was
Bruce
pretty
Pearl
huge.
took Aaron Kraft to the barbecue, and he's in the Final Four.
I mean, God, that's just like Eric Crawford did great piece on WDRB, just talking about how the redemption stories of Rick Pitino being the coach of the year, Bruce Pearl being in there, Kelvin
Coach of the year,
Sampson.
also. Yep.
Yeah, coach of the year, Todd Golden with what transpired there. But it's just funny to see some of these guys that we were thought that were, we have your playbook, and now we are fast forward in the time machine 8 years later, are getting back into the sport, and it's laughable at the things. Now, some of them, not as great as others, but they're back in it, and now it's just what's the difference between a guinea pig and a rat? One has a good PR agent. I say that all the time. That's what NIL is, and then just pay for play. That's all it is. It's literally that's all the difference. It's just rebranding the way they say it, so it's not as repugnant in the eyes of many out there. Now, before we get out of here, and I know we're itching closer to the top.
I do have one more thing.
Yeah,
I
real
meant
quick.
to hit on this earlier when we were talking about the Indiana Louisville series.
Yeah.
What do we need to do to get a newer version of the Big Four Classic back together? Because I said it like because obviously Louisville and Indiana, I would rather them be playing in Assembly Hall, the Yum Center. Indy's great if you gotta play neutral site, but Louisville and IU are playing in Gainbridge this year. Indiana and Kentucky are playing in Lucas Oil Stadium next year. What do we have to do? I know you can't do it with Notre Dame anymore because Notre Dame's in the ACC, so that doesn't work. But you take Louisville, Kentucky, IU, Purdue, have Louisville play Indiana, Kentucky play Purdue 1 year, then you switch it. Louisville plays Purdue, Kentucky plays IU the next year. You stuff them all into Lucas Oil or Gainbridge, and you fill that place up with Louisville, Kentucky, IU, and Purdue's kind of the ugly stepchild of that in terms of fan base traveling, but Purdue fans as well there, to where I think you would have spectacular atmospheres, a great doubleheader. You did it with the Big Four back in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was a hit. IU did the Crossroads Classic, which was very much a poor man's version of that for a while. I think that would be a spectacular way to kind of just celebrate what really is the epicenter of college basketball in this region, for the four fan bases in the area that cares more about the sport than anywhere else.
Yeah, no, I think look, I would love to get that back out there. I'd love some games to be at Freedom Hall, even if it were the Kentucky Indiana thing.
Well, I mean, you do. I mean, and I'll put it this way: if you do a Big Four Classic, you do an Indy 1 year, that could be a door to where maybe you could open it up and play it in the Yum Center because Louisville would be involved. Because I know you can't. Because they have it in the deal where Kentucky can't play regular season games without Louisville being
permission,
there, which is without permission. Maybe that's the way to get permission to have it there. Because I would love to have it in Freedom Hall. It would be absolutely spectacular to have it in Freedom Hall. The way Freedom Hall's set up, I know it worked great for the TBT, and they're playing there again this year, and they sold the thing out for IU, or not for IU, for the Louisville Kentucky TBT game. But let's be honest here. That thing belongs in the Yum Center.
Yeah.
Where they actually have the full basketball setup for seats still on the baselines.
Well, and it's funny to see, the whole notion around, them playing Gonzaga in Nashville, and like they're going to
like
Seattle
that's ridiculous.
to play. Right. It's like, I feel like, I mean, look, maybe that's just, 20 years ago, times have changed from the standpoint of Kentucky fans. The masses prefer to go down there, and it's like you do it for the SEC tournament every year. But
well, no, I think the reason they're going to Nashville is because they can't go to Louisville. And I know this is partially a Louisville podcast right now, but to be completely honest, I mean, IU plays games in Indy every year. Purdue plays games in Indy every year. North Carolina and Duke play games in Charlotte every year. The biggest brands play in the biggest cities, even
Yeah.
if, Butler's not booting. I know it's a little different because it's not their home court, but Butler's
Right.
not booting Purdue and Indiana. UNC
It's
Charlotte's
celebrating the
yeah,
sport.
it's celebrating the sport in the biggest city where, like it or not, there's a lot of Kentucky fans in Louisville and the surrounding areas as well. So I think that would be if they did the Big Four Classic, obviously Indy would be involved in but if they could get it to, and I know I'm probably asking for way too much here because if they honestly did it, they would probably just do it in Indy every year. But if you could find out a way to do it Indy one year, Yum Center the next, that is my personal dream
Yeah,
for
it would
college
be.
basketball scheduling.
No, it would be great, especially with all these neutral sites. My stance on it. I wish the city were a little bit more aggressive in trying to push and urge maybe the university to that. I think everyone's kind of working a little bit more hand in hand now for that. He's Jack Grossman. I'm Phil Baker. Before we get you out of here, I know we talked about the way too early top 25. You're starting to see we have about I don't know, about 2 weeks before the transfer portal closes for that. You got Jaden Quayton's transferring from Arizona State over to Kentucky, recommitting there again for that. You're getting some decommitments for Kentucky, but you're starting to see kind of the roster constructs of what everything is going to look like moving forward. The way too early top 25s are out there. For somebody who's not as locked in, tell our listeners some teams to be on the lookout. It's very early. Jack
Right. First of all,
Grossman's
these way too early top 25s mean absolutely nothing. In 3 days, they're not going to matter because
right.
other people
It's
will.
going to be
Yeah.
a Rubik's Cube, and it's going to be shifted around for that. But for what you've seen thus far, for just the rosters you have out there, and the brands that are always going to be there. What are some of the teams that you're like, okay, be on the lookout for some of these teams? We understand, people pick them apart, and they'll caption this and screen record this and say he was wrong there. But in Jack Grossman's personal record book, who do you like for next
I mean,
year?
preseason number one, I think right now is going to be Houston. And I know I chose to focus on kind of the Duke side of things when talking about the Final Four, just because I hadn't really done that yet, where I've talked about kind of everything else with it, but I just hadn't had the chance to really talk about the Duke side of it, so I wanted to get that out. But Houston, incredible year this past year. I really do feel bad for Calvin Sampson that he did not get to win the title. If you look, I have an Indiana banner behind me, and one of them signed by Calvin Sampson when he was the IU.
Oh,
coach,
nice!
actually.
I didn't know it was signed by that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was at
the jersey or banner.
The banner.
Nice.
Yeah, it was from an old Huber's trip. From back in the day, one of the 2 years he was the coach there. But felt really bad that they weren't able to get that done. Obviously, Florida, great story. Todd Golden, tribe member, happy for him. And Walter
Happy
Clayton
Passover.
happy Passover. Walter Clayton had one of the great runs in NCAA tournament history, a Kemba Walker run, incredible. But going forward to next year and those 3 games, best trio of Final Four games I can remember in any site that we can have. It was awesome. But anyways, Houston next year. Yes, they lose Jawan Roberts. Yes, they lose LJ Cryer. However, if Milos Uzan comes back and doesn't enter the NBA draft, he's projected as a top 40-ish pick right now. You would have a core of Uzan, Emmanuel Sharp, and JoJo Tugler to build around. 3 very, very good pieces. I think they also get Francis back. I know Terrence Arsenault just entered the transfer portal. On top of that, though, you get Pop Isaacs, an absolute stud scorer to kind of fill that LJ Cryer role transfer from Creighton, who is familiar with the Big 12 from his years at Texas Tech. Really, really, really good player. He's a stud. And again, that's the type of guy, because I saw a little bit, Pop Isaacs doesn't play defense, that's not really a fit. LJ Cryer, when he transferred to Houston, also did not play defense. Calvin Sampson was able to fix that. I trust he'll be able to do the same thing with Pop Isaacs as well, especially since he's a little bit bigger, a little bit more athletic than Cryer, too. They also bring in a top 5 recruiting class on top of it. So if they get Milos Uzan back, they're going to be preseason number 1 and very well deserved there. I think number 2, Purdue. Assuming that there's that Braden Smith doesn't enter the portal, which I know BBN's kind of wanted that to happen. But assuming he does indeed come back, we haven't heard officially, but I'm just kind of working on an assumption at that point.
Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah. All these sources, they put out these we talk about Case and Pryor put out cryptic things. BBN Media likes to put out very cryptic things with the eye emojis, as does Louisville fans too. I'm not getting all that, but it always makes me laugh. I'm like, what journalism is this right here? Just tell me.
Right, but assuming he does come back, you would bring back him and Trey Kaufman-Renn, two All-Americans from last year. Fletcher Loyer as well, dead-eye shooter. And yes, they lose Cam Heide and Miles Colvin, so they got to do some more work on the wing, but they bring in the Huff kid from South Dakota State. They're able to add just one or two Lance Jones types, who was their star wing on the team that went to the title game a couple years ago. I say star wing; he was just an absolute 3-and-D glue guy. Gave him athleticism and shooting. That was the missing piece for them. They can add one or two guys like that. They are absolutely going to be at the top of the sport again next year. Beyond that, I mean, people have Louisville third. They're going to be up there. I think Kentucky's going to be really, really good. They're going to be in that top 10 as well. Auburn, we got to see does Sahad Pettiford come back type of deal, that backcourt. Florida, we got to see what pieces come back. But back Alex Condon being the big name to watch there. But these teams are going to reload in the portal. They are. But Houston and Purdue are really the two that have kind of distanced themselves early. Duke with the Boozer brothers, they're going to be reloaded again as well. Well, so it's going to be another really fun year coming up.
Subscribe, Field of 68, Jack Grossman, Floyd Street's Finest, does great work over there. He's Jack Grossman 97 on Twitter, the artist formerly known as Twitter /X. I'm Phil__Baker. Appreciate it, Jackie boy. The basketball Benny himself, and also just thinking out loud when we're talking about this way too early top 25 before we get to break. I want to say, like, I know you can only go on these foreign like trips to the Bahamas. Was it every 4 years?
Yeah.
I think that's going to maybe change here in a bit. It would behoove places like Louisville, Kentucky, Indiana.
Yeah, I know Indiana's planning on doing one this year.
But I'm just, even if it's like in their practice facility and behind a paywall, or put it on YouTube to monetize it just off the views so you can collect and put that toward your collectives. I think the appetite, especially after what you saw down in the Bahamas and the ballrooms for Louisville, was absolutely there with what they put on Floyd Street Media. So maybe that's something that we could see. It's just like an open practice behind the scenes for that. So
also give them more than 4 hours a week in the summer. Rick Pitino's right on that one.
Yes, I completely agree on that. He's the basketball Benny, Jack Grossman. Happy Passover, buddy.
Happy Passover.
There it is. Yeah, there it is.
I gotta
right
go.
there.
I bought my matzah on Friday, so I had that prepared.
Attaboy.
I'll eat my 2 pieces before I get sick of it.
Yeah, that's how you operate on that. All right, he's Jack Grossman. I'm Phil Baker. On the other side, I think Nick Kurd's going to join us. We're going to try to react to the U of L spring game right here on your sports station, ESPN Louisville. Keep it locked here. We'll maybe talk some Masters too coming up here on the other side right here on your sports station.